Well, good morning, everyone. I can hear that some people are still finishing their breakfast and their coffees, but you can continue over here because I'm going to speak about very interesting and simple stuff. It's not in the literary language only, but also in business language. The presentation is very interesting, in fact, because when we talk about this opposition of the production and sales, I would not like to have it as rivals because my personal experience from the translation industry, it's rather related to sales, to commercial side, to marketing. So this perspective might look really commercial-wise because I'm really dealing with this more. But I would like to share my experience about the tools that we use to develop the interaction between the sales and the production. At this slide, I would like to introduce a translation agency with a production section and the sales unit, and they interact to a certain extent among themselves. That they have certain communication. They have these issues about calculating the cost of the offer and also the approach to answer the questions of the customer. But let's think of a situation when there is the perfect situation, when the production gets this manager, Yuri, and he's very happy, and he informs the production unit that he brought the cool offer, 1,000 pages for 10 months, and he sold a page, $50 a page. The client is very easy to handle. They're not going to check the translation or else, and he's very happy, and he informs about this to the manager, to the project manager, Svetlana. She's happy to hear that because she's looking forward to the high profit margin, and she also informs her colleagues about that, and they are ready to distribute the task in the system. Can you imagine this? This actually was the practical case, but as it usually goes, something went wrong. On the next morning, Yuri rushes into the production unit with the crazy eyes and claims that there are changes into the contract, and the deadline is in a month and a half, and you need to follow the glossary from the customer, but the glossary will only arrive in 10 days or so, and you have to translate not into English but into Hindi. I think this problem is recurrent while Yuri is smiling, and he gets to realize that he faces a huge problem with this order. What do you think the production people would have to do? Of course, the war starts, the war breaks out, and this corporate opposition or resistance starts. So this is the third day with the rough calculations, with the unproductive meetings, dispute, conflicts, and rows in the corridors of the company. The CEO of the company, Yuri, with the huge experience behind, fails to understand how come that all of these achievements that he has been building for so many years would crash in a moment. How come that this war between the production unit and the sales unit unleashed? I think this interaction between the production unit and the sales unit, this is the important link that any translation agency has. So in order to have the efficient cooperation between these employees, you would rely largely on this cooperation to have the future of the company, the future growth of the company, and also the capacity of the company to enter new markets and to develop. We're all trying to aim for the perfect world when all of the employees understand each other and they support their initiatives and express their new ideas. And what is most important, they interact among each other in a very good way, and they are able to tackle really non-standard issues, and they interact among each other as efficiently as they can. All CEOs actually want to have this kind of the sales unit or the production unit where the employees would decide for themselves, they would interact among themselves and get the results themselves. In my experience, I can think of the companies like this, but there are a few of them. It's really the major achievement that they have, but unfortunately, this is not usually so. In order to get into the problem, we need to understand what the project managers think of the sales managers and vice versa. Just a typical unsophisticated company with a low level of management. This is interesting to consider. This is my personal experience based on some of the survey, because Tatiana and I, we were trying to prepare for this presentation, and we conducted the survey for several Russian translation companies, and the findings are very interesting to see. So the salesperson in the eyes of the project manager, well, he thinks that they think that he probably is on this position because he couldn't find anything else. Of course, talking the talk is not as good as walking the walk, and they can beat the air and talk any person into anything, literally. Of course, they want to sell as cheap as possible, and the products will be very simple. Well, this is when they got the very complicated low-margin project as well, the others are working with the good, high-paying companies, while we have to deal with this bullshit translation. Well, these people don't understand anything about the translations, and they only follow the needs of the client in the first place. And, well, this is the padding, this is the layer we don't need in this company. Well, the project managers would always say, I don't get why they get so much money. Whenever I get to the sales unit, there's no one there after 6 p.m. Why are they there? This is the opinion of the production unit people about the sales unit. We also had a survey for the sales unit, what their opinion is about the production unit people. Well, there are many similar things that we found. Usually, well, they think, well, there's a very long deadline and high cost. We're not competitive. Aren't you able to reduce the margin to have the proper cost so that we could really do our sales job? Why do we need to handle this ourselves? Why can't you do this for yourselves? And then they would talk to their managers and really arguing about the production not be able to do anything. Why would the production crowd not do anything? Or we're going to have the quality issues again. I know that we're going to have issues with quality again. Why do I need to be responsible and liable for your mistakes in the production? I need to fulfill the plan, and you have another problem. You don't have anyone to do the job. You should use your head to think of this problem. You shouldn't be following the guidelines so strictly. You should try to think out of the box. Well, the production unit is not capable of anything. But of course, they claim that I don't understand why they get the money they are paid for. So whenever I came to the production unit, there is no one there after 6 p.m. What do we do about that? Well, these are undereducated people, don't understand anything about the sales process. Well, the customer is paying for everything. We need to do everything for the customer. This is the position of the salesperson. And of course, the most important thing that the salesperson says in all companies, in almost all companies, I don't need to know the product so deeply. I don't need to understand the layout, the editing, and the distribution of tasks, the CAD tools. I don't need to know all of this. This is about the production. This is their job. They need to understand this. I don't get why they get the money. This is the position that they all have. Why do we have the situation after all? Tatiana and I, we see it in the following. First of all, there is lack of awareness, lack of understanding. The managers of these different sections of these different unions, they have little understanding of each other's job. Yes, indeed. It's very difficult to imagine the situation when, in the life of the sales manager, it's all very simple as it looks. He or she brings the order, and the production must execute it. Even if there are some complicated technical requirements, these terms of references that are really highly complicated, but of course these are experienced employees that work there, and we all understand that not every order is really so valued by the translation company. That's true. In the world of a manager, especially the manager who has little experience, it looks very different. Like in his picture of the world, he believes that we take everything from the customer and we can manage everything. The production would back me up. I am the hero. I went there for hunting. I hunted a good order, and you must deal with this. Well, I've had many situations like this when the company really kills this position of the manager from the very first moments. But on global scale, this is not the best and position, because the sales manager needs to understand and be aware of the peculiarities of the order, about the margin structure, and the lack of awareness and lack of knowledge on both sides really complicates the interaction between these two. We can see this as illustrated by different companies. People from the production union do not have a clue what the salespeople are doing, and vice versa. So the lack of knowledge does generate these severe contradictions, and we need to get into this to understand this. Another important point to deal with is about the contradictions and the motivations. Contradictions in motivations, when the salespeople are really motivated by different things than the production people. You know that there is the stimulating people and motivating the salespeople. There is a big difference between these two. Well, stimulating, it's about how much the person is going to earn and on what he's going to earn on that. Well, motivation is a little bit different thing. This is something that helps the employee understand the genuine reasons to work with the customers. So the discrepancy between these two does generate some contradictions and controversies. Whenever the salesperson is motivated to achieve the goal and to achieve the plan, and his task is to sell as much as possible to increase the profits of the company, while the project manager really has the objective to have a high profit margin. And this is where the first contradiction comes from, because they are moving in different directions. While one of these are trying to reduce the cost of the order, and the others want to have as many orders as possible. But there is this controversy because none of these have the shared motivation. And when they're talking about the fulfilling the sales plan, it does impact the salaries of the entire company, because when they only fulfilled it by 80%, that implies minus 20% of the salaries of all of the employees of the company, for example, for the last month. This kind of motivation would change the approach and would change the attitude of the planning unit, and everyone understands that they could have the shared goal, the same objective, and they need to fulfill the plan no matter the profit margin, whether high or low. Another aspect is, well, you can include the margin into the plan of the project manager, But the salesperson needs to have it transparent and clear. This is the person who analyzes the situation and does the analysis on a daily basis, analyzing the sales levels. They're not going to calculate and do these complicated calculations about the salaries and how it's impacted from this plan. All of this shall be included into your CRM system or another system if it has the feature like that. Like the profit margin is a very disputable issue because you can understand in the end of the month that you can see it only after some period of time when you are doing the calculations about the salaries. And of course, the manager needs to see it immediately to understand the outcome.
So weak communication is, of course, the weakest part. Also, the lack of knowledge is in part can be compensated with the communication between these employees. And the communication between the regular employees is even more important than the communications between the heads of the departments. And if something is happening in the sales, people in the production should know about that, and vice versa. And like changes in the production should be communicated to the sales. Or if there is an overload in the production, the sales managers should know about that. If there are some considerable problems with the talent in one of the departments, another department should know about that. So if, for instance, we are not expecting many new sales in the nearest future, so we need to discuss this. And it usually happens that there is some kind of information vacuum, although some people do have the understanding that this information should be transferred from one department to another. If you have from 5 to 10 people, this may happen automatically, everyone knows what's happening, but if your numbers are higher, this can grow into a considerable problem, which I've seen in the past. Also, the corporate culture, if it's not expressly written down. So, uh, what do we understand when we say corporate culture? Do we mean just some regulations or some unwritten rules? As I've seen in some European companies, they do not have any limitations for working hours. You can be working around the clock. You can work maybe like 4 hours per week, but the main thing is to produce the results, and this is a part of the corporate culture. Also, they have places for recreation, relaxation, and that's another part of the corporate culture. Everyone uses a first name, everyone can call each other on any day, and you can provide some advice to colleagues while staying at home. That's normal working situation in a leading company in the industry. So there should be a corporate culture that unites the company. And in major Russian companies, there are written rules of corporate culture. We should respect each other. We should support each other in any situation, looking for solutions. That's a good approach. Many things can be written down, but there are other things that cannot be written down, and these other things should support and cultivate wholesome working relations between sales and production. Maybe they are not exactly friends, but they should be good colleagues. And one more point is one-sided position of management. So, as a rule, the head of the company is either someone from the sales or someone from the production. So, I worked for a company which had its CEO from the production world. And in this case, of course, the position of the CEO is translated to the entire company. In this case, the salesperson is always the one who is not right, rather than the person from the production. And here you should be quite an experienced high-level manager in order to solve these issues correctly. So if you openly say this to the salesperson that you are not right, everyone hears that, then the production will believe this for a long time, that the owner of the company is supporting them and not the sales. And quite often it happens that the owner of the company says that you are no one here and you are not doing anything important. So they hire three salespeople and they fire them in 3 months because there are no sales, but they are not trained properly and they're just being told you are a salesperson, just go and sell. And that's quite a popular situation that is happening in our consulting practice. We saw such a company just a month ago. So a salesperson is someone who can sell anything, especially translations, especially in Moscow. Why not? So the position of management should be very careful, and it should reflect the interests of the entire company, not just some department. And here we need to be very careful. Right now, I will be sharing something that Tatiana and I found in our own experience. This is our position, so I warn you about this in advance. What can be done? First, training. A well-detailed training plan for weekly training of employees of different departments, like on technologies, processes, etc. In different companies, it's being done in different ways, like, for instance, an hour and a half each week of training for sales representatives, like on how to work with MemSource, MemoQ, on how to distribute orders. Uh, Vendor manager can share about the process of selection and hiring of personnel to show the whole production chain. If it's being done in the proper way, you will see some very serious results. And in just half a year, your sales manager will have even better knowledge than even the project manager who worked for a different company. So they will have a very good understanding of the needs of the client. And if you are interested in that, you can also do trainings for the production people and explain to them what it means to do a cold call, what actions are necessary to get the order, and why orders are so complicated right now, and why in 2019 we need to strive for being able to fulfill any kind of order, even if they are complicated. So this is a way to train each other by employees of different departments. The second issue here is mutual understanding of each other's value. In some companies, there is some rotation of employees from one department into another. Like for a day or two, or for a week, let's say a salesperson becomes a project manager, and you can't even imagine the huge effects of that. So when the person comes back to their department, people start asking questions, and the person answers, you know, for my entire life, I've been doing everything incorrectly. Now I understand what are the needs of my colleagues. And that's a totally normal, wholesome practice. Even if that's a very talented salesperson, some people say, okay, they need just to sell all the time. But quite often these are also very talented people and talented learners, so they can very quickly acquire all the details of the process. And quite often it's also difficult to persuade people from the production to go to the sales department for a day or two and to do some cold calls. So, nevertheless, taken part in the life of the company, especially when there are many cold calls, for instance, in the evening of Thursday or Friday, and if you get several no's from secretaries of some companies, if you try using the CRM system, well, that's a very useful experience for the production person. So this creates mutual value, and this starts working. There is one more ambitious task here. Uh, when we are, for instance, creating some unit oriented for a particular industry, and this unit will include a production person and a salesperson, and they work for one industry, let's say oil and gas, and they deal only with this industry. They have a very good mutual understanding, and they have a very clear task to bring in as much money as possible, and it gives quite good results. So here I just wanted to emphasize mutual value. One more thing, clear, transparent motivation. If everyone works in the same direction, if everyone intends to grow the revenues or the growth of company, and if every employee is benefiting from achieving this task, if everyone sees that we are indeed growing, or we, for instance, have difficulties with fulfilling the plan, and this should impact the salaries of everyone, not only the salespeople, because everyone is working for the same goal, and everyone should understand that if we earn the money, we get the money. If you don't, then you don't. So, yeah, I more into commerce than into production, and I believe that sales are the locomotive of every company. If there are no sales, there is no work for the accountants, for the project manager, for the CEO of the company. That's quite a one-sided position on my part, but still, if of course, if the salespeople are selling and the production is not doing anything, well, quite soon the sales will stop. So there should be a single unified position, and this results should be transparent. There can be a big whiteboard with all the results of the company over the last months, like the CRM system, for instance, could provide this information. And if everyone has an understanding of what the goals are and what the current achievements are, it's best when they can see that. Again, creation of the wholesome working climate. So that's again some managerial topic. We are not creating any informational vacuum, but at least once a month, in company of any size, there should be a general meeting where people share about the changes. And this is a golden rule. Every employee should have a say on such a meeting, and we shouldn't immediately say that you're not right or you're right. First, we listen to everyone. First, we understand what is happening, and on such meetings, we could be able to share about the changes, like, for instance, increasing the number of vendor managers to be able to work with the Hungarian language. Okay, so the salespeople will understand this problem has been solved, and if this problem was in some point in the past escalated from the salespeople, and now they hear that okay, they were heard, um, they were understood, and now the number of Hungarian language vendors increased. So this should be the place to discuss the targets, the goals, the achievements. This should be the time to praise the people who were really successful, like a $10 pen is not too expensive present for the best employee, and such small items can be very well motivating for a person, even more motivating than some maybe additional $500. So there is also some sense in discussing the drawbacks and shortcomings in such general meetings, but this depends on the position of the company and the goals the company sets before itself. And one more point here, group interactions. Right now, some team building, some workshop, um, that's a buzzword right now. So you can test and try which collaborations are effective in your case. Um, in my opinion, some kind of retreats are very effective when you are going outside the city, and you right now can experience this. So people have some informal communication, and people can play some table tennis or any other kind of sports, and please be careful uh, and be careful, especially while selecting people for the teams, and you can take into account the relations, let's say, between people from the sales and the production. And on such events, you can see the real relations between people. And of course, workshops are also useful. They can be almost compulsory, and at some point in the future you will see the benefits. If there is a clear-cut goal, and everyone is explained that on weekend we are going to have some kind of retreat, and our goal is good team building. And if everyone has a good understanding of that, it works and it's useful. So the interaction between these two teams, the sales and the production, uh, makes up an ideal team. And this is our goal, and this is where I would like to end my presentation. We have quite a lot of time left, so I'm ready to answer all your questions if you have them. Thank you, dear colleagues, for your attention.
Thank you very much. You managed to amazingly wake up our colleagues and really bring up their mood. Well, this is what I plan to do. Well, this is the great beginning of a good day. And now let's see whether we have any questions. You should have some, I'm sure. Do you have any? Well, you're trying to pull yourself together. Well, Alexander? Then I have a question. That's the key question so far. Well, everyone is still trying to think about some elevated things. My question is, you clearly define the goal, the objective. Of course, it's clear. You need to aim for the profit margin, and you need to see the margin, and both sides need to see this. This makes them understand why they're working for and what's behind this order. Now, my question is, if I'm not mistaken, this is the $1 billion question. Well, many people in the company, they are not able to calculate the margin. They can calculate how much salary they pay to the employees. They can easily calculate how much they get from the client and how much they pay to the subcontractors. But the scope of effort that the non-production units invested into the specific project is basically intangible for them. This is not possible for them to calculate this. But the problem is that they're asked to show something that many people I know have not a clue how to calculate. And I'm talking about the big multi-billion corporations. That's a very good question to deal with. Fortunately, I have the answer because I was trying to hear the end of the question, but I have the answer. Well, big corporations. I used to work in the telecommunications market, and my answer is very simple. They calculate the cost of attracting one order, the average cost of attracting one order. In telecommunications, it's called SOC. I'm not sure what it stands for, but as you see, you count and all of the cost and all of the orders, and you divide by the total number, and this is how you get the cost of one client or one order, rather. This is how they. Well, it's not even about the margin, but about the indicators that show that, well, this month, guys, it's really bad with us because we really have high costs, but the profits are low. So of course, the bigger the company, the more complicated it is to calculate about this cost. But in terms of orders, they include not only all of the operational costs, but also all of the costs related with marketing. These are the salespeople, the salaries for the managers, the accounting officers, and the others. So I really encourage you to take a look on this indicator. Well, it partially can help you address this issue and understand what might be going wrong. Well, this is the unconventional answer, I would say. I haven't heard any similar answers from the people from the industry, and I believe you would think about that. Meanwhile, you had some time to think about some other smart questions. To start with, I would like to thank you for this great presentation, Dmitry. And my question is, well, yesterday we talked with the colleagues, and they say that the translation industry is not as simple as it might seem. And when we talk about the salespeople with a basic background, he finds it very difficult to understand all of the sophisticated peculiarities of the translation business. And he might not understand many things. So it's better to educate and train your salesperson yourself from scratch. And this is where the problem is. What is best to have this basic sales background and then trying to teach a person about the translation peculiarities, or maybe you get a person and really train a person from scratch, and then possibly you can have a person with a charisma without any basic background. What do you mean by basic? Basic backup. Yeah, my question is, what is most important for the salesperson? The specialized education or the charisma and understanding of all of the translation peculiarities when you have been raised and trained from scratch without any basic sales background? That's a very good question. Well, I need to say that the salespeople today in the CIS countries do not have any specialized background or specialization. The professional salesperson is a person with a number of competences, and this is what differentiates him or her from the others. First of all, this is the clear adherence to specific things like the technologies of sales. I know at least a dozen of them, and they should know at least a couple of them. This is also the high awareness of technologies. There is the CRM system, and you're doing the repetitive things every day. You have the task, and you answer the call, and you process every objection and give all of the replies. This is also analyzing the technologies of the clients. Well, nobody really trains you with this background. This is only something that can be trained partially on the MBA course or on the specialized sales training workshops. So, this specialized education for the salesperson, this is not the story that we share because we don't have any. And also, the good experienced sales manager as a person who got used to earning a lot and most often as fast as possible. Within our environment, people who work with the large cycles of transactions, like from 4 to 24 months, this person would not be able to earn for the family fast and much because there will be times when they will be earning 1,000 a year and higher. it's going to take 4 or 6 months to get to this level. Meanwhile, he needs to have the backup, the reliable backup. Well, we are not engaging the sales managers like this to our customers' companies because we understand that this is the long transaction cycle, and also the employees will be leaving very fast, and the company is very difficult to handle, and they are, the star salespersons. They don't want to invest their time and effort into this for such a long time. Well, I think it would be very good to have the unexperienced sales managers, and I really believe that when you take the people from the linguistic universities, graduates from the linguistic universities, and teach them about the sales, because they do understand something about languages. If they want to work as translators, welcome to sales. I don't see any problem about this. The great example I can quote several companies from St. Petersburg or Moscow. They've developed 2 or 3 great sales units with the employees without any previous background in sales. One of them is now getting the profit 3 to 4 million of rubles a month, working in the large-scale oil and gas project. And this is the employee that graduated 2 years ago. I believe that the unexperienced manager with some of the talent for the salesperson, I'll be talking about this talent later. Well, it's better to take this person and teach about our industry. So, yeah, my answer is it's better to have the unexperienced salespeople and teach them. And also, how can you identify the salesperson at any interview? There is a very one easy thing. This is the flexibility of mind. Well, the salesperson has this technical mind, so to say. This is the person who can see many solutions to a problem, like solution 1, solution 2, 7, 8, etc. When an employee thinks technical, he only has 2 or 3 solutions. The salesperson sees dozens of solutions. So whenever they get to production and they tell him it's impossible to do, he is not able to understand how come things could be impossible, and he could see many other solutions. Well, that's the major difference. That's why I believe that the unexperienced salesperson is really possible to train. Well, another issue about having a person, the salesperson, by birth. When there is person coming there, I don't know any technologies, but I'm just the salesperson. I can actually sell snow to Eskimo people. But you know, of course, the fact that this person is so talkative and blabbering, we will be able to sell this snow to the people in the north. But in the evening, they will realize that they bought something they didn't really need, and then they will write the angry post in the social media and they will curse this salesperson. We cannot be relying on this kind of salesperson. The person who is really talkative and is eloquent, is emotional, and this is kind of the selling sales of person. Yes, of course you can have a person like that, but this is part of his charisma and part of his temperament. But it doesn't imply any talent of the salesperson. Of course, there must be the charisma. Currently, the professional salesperson is somebody who knows the business of the client. There is the reliable survey by Milihari Group in 2017. The U.S. companies were surveyed, and some of the major market actors were asked, like Coca-Cola, Microsoft, and the others, and they asked, "Why do you like this manager? Why do you work? Why are you going to continue to work with this sales manager?" What they answered was, "I work with them because he understands my business, because he understands what's happening within my business, and we talk the same language." And they were never mentioned their charisma or any other temperament features. Well, I hope I managed to answer your question, even though I was trying to use different examples. I think this is the great answer because I enjoyed when listening, since the answer was very extended, you might have had other questions. While you're still thinking of other questions, I'll take the floor to make a difference. Well, you do have a question. Hello. Well, what do you think? You mentioned that sales is the engine of business, but suppose there is a company with 20 persons, and you, as the owner of business, and you want to develop it. What do we start with? Do we start with production? When the rain starts, you would use the spoons, not the forks. Or do you start with the promotion, the context-based advertising, or the sales unit? What is something to start the expansion of the company? Sales. Your sense of humor is fantastic. That's a good answer to have. Sales. Sales, this is something you start with, that's for sure. Because you need to understand you might spend a lot of money for the preparation for a project, expanding the production unit, and getting ready for the big number of orders, and you will procure much of machinery. But then the um, sellers somehow would decide not to sell to you. I think this is just, you need to have the psychology of a startup when you think of expansion. So first, when you expand the scope of sales, and then you develop the chain of support for your company. But then when you see where the salespeople are strong about, then it will help you decide how to optimize the further growth in the production chain. Also, you mentioned an important point, marketing or generation. Well, there is this concept of the target customer with the ongoing need for translations with big orders, with many orders. Such kind of customers, rarely do they come from the lead generation from this promotion trend. I wouldn't think of this large-scale construction or oil and gas company searching for internet for your translation services. Of course, they will be searching in other places. If you want the medium-level cost orders, then of course you should think of the marketing budgets, or maybe you want to work with the individual entrepreneurs. But if you want to get this target customer, this is something that would expand your sales unit and something that would enhance your sales unit and build the capacity of your sales unit. If you want to deal with the oil and gas and the others, what will be dealing with, there was this boom of translation agencies that suddenly started dealing with medicine, and there are few experts, genuine experts in that. While managers doing the medical or pharmaceutical translations, there are really few, and the people that are answering the phone, a big pharmaceutical company, they would ask several questions that help them understand whether they're going to opt for this translation agency. And these are the questions trying to understand whether the managers understand what the business is about, what their JP inspection or the health record is. That's why you need to think about this industry specification of each manager. You don't need to have the jack of all trades as a manager. This is not how it works today. That's the great answer. You even answered more than the person asked about. You exceeded the expectations, so to say. We have a couple of minutes more, and since you are the good person to answer questions, then we will get more. Otherwise, I ask my question. Of course, we have one. Good morning. So you mentioned the overall motivation within the company, the cross motivation, because when you overperform, that impacts all of the employees and etc. But how do you motivate the salespeople and how do you motivate the production people separately? I'm the expert in sales, so if I may, I would be talking about sales. There are many different motivation schemes. The most typical classic, the most widespread scheme, which I believe combines all of the important aspects for the motivation of managers. It must include the rate, the payment at the moment of employing this person. It must be higher than that of the employee that has been working already for 6 months before. This salary uh, should be the downward uh, scheme based from the 60, then the 30, 35. Why do we get this higher salary in the beginning? Because you do understand that he's not going to have a big salary in the first month, and you do realize that he's not going to have a big salary in the second month. He's the salesperson. He wants to earn on the orders. So it's going to take some 3, 4, even 5 months. So you need to offer the comfort to the person in from the very beginning while you're still teaching the person. And then his salary would also include the commission, the fee that includes the fee from the first volume of his sales, and then several KPIs. These KPIs could be very different depending on the goals of your company, but the first important thing is to perform and on the plan of sales. This is the major goal, the major objective that any sales manager needs to reach. But it depends on the pricing policy, on the volume of sales, on the position on the market. There are many other factors. But my recommendation would be to set the level which is 60 to 80% higher than his actual average. Well, basically, if he underperforms, so lower than 60% of the fixed rate, then he would only get this fixed rate without any additional commission fees, and then he would need to think hard what he needs to improve and what he needs to do. So this first KPI shall always be related and linked directly to the sales plan. That's the most important thing for any sales manager. But of course, the plan needs to be elaborate and proper. You need to have the proper plan developed and drafted on the basis of the proper analysis. Of course, the manager would start in the first month with some of the transactions of 100,000 and more. This is intangible. It will take some 3, 4, or 5 months to get this result. The second important point that impacts his salary is the share of sales, the rate of sales. It depends on you. Currently in the market and in our market, in European and US market, the motivation prevails when you pay the rate from the transaction. It's not about the margin, but the fee from transaction. The manager is not able to understand the profit margin. He can only understand it in the end. That's why it's the fee from sales. It's the rate of sales. So whenever they have a new transaction, like you have 7% of sales, seven. This is not from the money paid, but from the transaction sales. And then this transaction, this client would be transferred to the service unit, and then throughout the 24 months, these could be very different rates from transactions or sales based on this client. This could be 1% or 3%, depends on your financial model. But the manager needs to understand that the manager will get the high rate for the first order, but when they really transfer this client to the service unit, he will still continue to get his rate, the lower rate, but it will give him some backup padding, so to say. It's fine. It's kind of motivation. But there are also other schemes when the manager would have to work with this client for the first 6 months because he really spent a lot of time hunting for this client, but maybe he will have less time now to hunt for new clients more. Another option would be for the number of meetings, the number of reference letters to promote this manager, the number of business cards, the number of calls, the number of web meetings, the number of whatever the number of smiles of the CEO from the morning. Well, these are very different things, the KPIs that you identify yourselves, but you should really set them because you can really set the KPIs and the tasks every month, depending on your vision and your approach. For example, this month you need to enhance your reputation, then you should focus on the reference letters. Or maybe in the other month you need more clients from the specific sector. This is what you translate into KPIs, basically. Well, this model could be also based on the growth in sales or the financial support of the translation company when you pay the rate from the transactions paid. Because this is something that disciplines the managers when they wouldn't be demanding the money immediately after signing the transaction. Thank you. Now, I'm not going to talk about production much because I would not like to sound unprofessional. Thank you. We are pressed for time now. People got very active and started asking more questions. He really answered these questions in a very interesting and informative way. But I need to express my gratitude on behalf of all of the audience for this lively, interesting presentation and some of the unconventional and inventive answers. And I hope we will be able to invite you to other presentations. Thank you. Let's give a round of applause.